arrogant, throwing fits, ripping shit, tearing it, imperative. Then I'm killing this mic no matter where I live. These derelict rappers acting a fool, this embarrassing is flagrant. That's the nature of this entertainment, and we can't even change it. Guilty before arraignment, now the system tainted. But when we speak, they all laugh at us. And y'all wonder why I'm lacking trust. Trying to fight a giant with attorneys that can back them up. That's church versus science, both sides start acting up. I'm late on my assignment, hopping up a mile high, climbing, obviously never silent. New alignment, I'm defiant, can I describe it? Used to describe it as a young graffiti artist. Before the beard, I always got carded. Hit every bar, even though my bar's been the hardest. The scars on my face, and I ain't always been the smartest. But I'll show you where my heart is. I said I'll show you where my heart is. I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeves, even if the beat stops, my soul will not leave. If I never stood tall, nobody will ever see. I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeve, I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeves, even if the beat stops, my soul will not leave. If I never stood tall, nobody will ever see. I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeve, I can show you where my...
The type of guy that would ride with the breeze. I'm higher than most people, I'm cold and icicle freeze. I'm liking to Mike Tyson, I'm a bison, a beast. I'm hot like Jamaica, like right by the beach. My pops is from a spot where they're fighting for peace. 8 years old out there watching people fight in the streets. All these sirens only make the violence increase. Yeah, we're still not loving police. It's that bright young American, nice, dumb, arrogant. Tight on a mic, but he might need a therapist. Heart full of kerosene, head full of fairy tales. Said that you're my homie, you don't know me, but I know you very well. Roll back on some West Coast shit. This whole track is wetter than your dress code kiss. About to hit the track, running on some retro fit. Against all lit, I guess so, bitch, now let's go.
I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeves, even if the beat stops, my soul will not leave. If I never stood tall, nobody will...
Ladies and gentlemen, Tuesday, May 30th, coming in hot. We got Hannah in the house joining us this evening. Pinky, how you doing, my guy?
I'm doing great, buddy. I'm doing great. What a week. What a week. I'm so excited.
Is it not perfect that our intro ends with Jordan and his shot over the Cavs, and we're going to just have plenty of playoff basketball to talk right now?
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. So we were able to get a special guest with us, our boy Greg Wissinger, which I'll bring into the room now. Add him to the pod.
No, just introduce him and then let him sit back studio for just days on end. Greg, how you doing, my guy?
Good. How you guys doing?
Oh man, fabulous! Absolutely fabulous. Can't complain about a whole lot right now. Hope springs eternal for college football and the Broncos, and the Nuggets are in their first finals ever, and the Rockies have never existed. So life is really good right now.
That is pretty good, man. That is pretty good. Oh, how's the King's Herald, my man?
Things are good. I mean, it's kind of a lull for us. As Kings fans, we're generally a bit more excited around draft time, but this year we're picking a lot later than we're used to, so it's kind of weird for us. We're like, I mean, I don't got to memorize like all the top 10 guys. Like, Kings are picking 24th, so it's a little less exciting than it normally is this time.
Not even in the lottery. What do you guys do with yourselves now?
Good problems to have, though.
Well, we will definitely talk about that a little bit because I am interested to hear your thoughts. And for those that don't know, Greg runs his own, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but website, podcast, kind of all one and the same, called the King's Herald. Him and some buddies focus specifically on the Sacramento Kings and all Kings theorized, past, post, present. So
whatever you need, man, they got it all.
Yeah, he's got you hooked up with some merch as well. So check him out. You can see the @GWIS there. Give him a follow. Even if you don't like the Kings, the guy has some decent basketball insights. It's worth paying attention to and listening. So,
hey, GWIS's Twitter game is top notch. And that's not just because I like the guy. Like it's pretty good.
Hey, there you go. You're looking for a new Twitter follower. You know, I don't post anything, and I've been told I have to get on that. So until that happens, go check out GWIS. Pleasure to have you on, sir. Pleasure to have you on and hanging out with us. It's been a minute.
Yeah, fun to be back.
Binky, Before we jump into basketball, because there's going to be a lot of it to discuss, do you have any nonsensical nonsense that you'd like to bring to the table that's happened in the last week that you want to get off your chest? Any pinky story time, anything along those lines, or are we going right in?
Anything that's pinky story time is probably R-rated, but did go to a great restaurant that was recommended by one of my friends called La Loma in Castle Rock. It was awesome. I love fajitas. I was in heaven. The drinks were really good. They were expensive, but really good. And just throw a shout out to those guys. They, my wife and I went there for our anniversary, and it was a great evening. So
Excellent. Well, happy late anniversary, sir. Now, with that all being said, I don't have any nonsense to discuss. I want to jump in here with Greg, and my first question for you, sir, being that you are such a huge Kings fan, and you run a site dedicated to all things Kings, good, bad, and indifferent, how would you grade the season as a whole? Where would you put it on Kings fandom radar, if you will?
Just as far as the Kings season went?
Yeah, just the Kings right now. Just as a whole, in a bubble, if you will. How did you guys feel about the Kings season? I know it didn't necessarily end on a high note per se. A lot of hype going into that series with Golden State, but as a whole, I from an outside perspective looking in, feel like they overachieved to the umpth degree this season compared to what people had them doing at the beginning of the season. But as somebody who followed them closely, would you feel that's accurate? Do you feel like expectations continuously change throughout the season, seeing as how they continue to kind of bust through those barriers that had been set in front of them in the past? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was funny to see, over the course of the season, because, I mean, definitely if you went back to the start of the year and what even the most optimistic fans were looking for, I mean, a 45-win season being the 3 seed in the West, taking an established championship team like the Warriors to a Game 7. If you had told us we were getting that at the start of the year, we would have been thrilled, over the moon. That was so far above and beyond what we expected the year to be. As the season went on, people started getting greedy and started adjusting expectations and things like that. So, there's definitely people that were upset or disappointed with the way the season ended. But, I mean, honestly, like, you took the defending champs to a Game 7, a team with, years and years of playoff and championship pedigree, and it took Steph dropping 50 on you in the final game to knock you out the playoffs. Like, you can sleep at night and be like, all right, for our first year, kind of breaking that drought of the playoff drought and kind of reestablishing as a young up-and-coming team, it's hard to be too upset about that. So it was a fantastic year, and we're excited about where they can go in the future.
So that's a great lead-in. Where do you think they can go in the future? What do you consider the young core? Because I know where I would stop that core and then start filling in around that. But what do you see in the future? What do you see this offseason? What do you consider that young core? Who would you consider part of that as an inside kind of Kings guy?
So the primary core is going to be Fox, Sabonis, and Keegan Murray, right? Those are kind of the 3 key pieces that they're going to be building around. And then kind of the second layer would be guys like Herter and Monk and Davion Mitchell. And then, you've got the rest of the pieces beyond that. Those kind of core 3, I think, are probably more or less untouchable unless there was just a Godfather offer of some sort. But anyone else could potentially be moved just to, as they look at ways to improve the team. They've got their first-round pick they could trade this year. They've got the rights to Sasha Vezenkov, who just won MVP in EuroLeague and just barely missed out on winning the MVP or the EuroLeague title. So whether he comes over or they could trade those draft rights, they've got an asset there. They've got some potential maneuverability with Harrison Barnes, who's now a free agent. They could either bring him back, they could let him walk, or they could. What I think is probably the more likely outcome would be try to figure out some sort of sign and trade, where find him a new deal and a new home, but still get something back for their trouble. So, a lot of different ways that they can still improve, either this off season or even moving forward into the next trade deadline.
I love that. I would completely agree with that core. Those I like how you said that they're pretty much untouchable if somebody else somebody comes in with a Godfather offer. And honestly, I don't know even if a Godfather offer would make me move those three, just because me personally, I feel like the NBA has finally crested that ledge, and they're going back to that 1 or 2 star kind of team and putting a bunch of really nice pieces around them, rather than building those super teams and guys leaving in free agency. What do you think about that idea?
No, the new CBA, and I am still trying to kind of get a grasp on it because there's a lot of changes, and it's going to take some time to really understand all the nuances and how it really impacts. But it's pretty clear that they're cutting down on teams that are being way over the cap and having a bunch of basically the superstar teams are going to be really hard to maintain just with the kind of ongoing punitive damages that can kind of happen when you do it year over year. So there's definitely going to be a bigger emphasis on kind of homegrown talent and guys on rookie deals and guys on second deals as opposed to just the superstars on max deals.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, the Kings. Me personally, I kind of see it as Golden State as that kind of benchmark, if you will, as far as what the new CBA is going to require. Like you said, homegrown, built through the draft. Very unlikely you're trading, your entire future for a superstar kind of thing like the Suns just did going forward. Golden State kind of set that bar. Now, obviously, they're paying luxury tax and then some every year to try and keep that group together here recently. So that will change. But as far as how they started and all came up together, they're kind of the benchmark of the new NBA. I would actually say the Nuggets are second now, and they're kind of coming into their zone. And honestly, I feel like the Kings are kind of right behind the Nuggets, depending on what they can fill out that roster with. I kind of believe the Kings and Nuggets could be something we witness in the Western Conference for a good 5 to 10 years going forward. Do you feel like the Kings will be able to continue to put those pieces around those three that you mentioned earlier?
I mean, from what we've seen so far, there's no reason to think they can't. Monte McNair, their GM, who just won GM of the Year, he has done a really good job of finding value, both in the draft and free agency and trades. He's made smart moves, and even the moves that he was in on that didn't work out have shown us that he's identifying the right types of players. Not every trade is going to happen. You can't make everything happen, but it points to a good process. And I mean, really, that's kind of the secret sauce in the NBA is if you have a management that can identify talent and find value in deals and doesn't overpay on things. That's really the key to good team building anymore, and especially with a CBA that doesn't let you just pay your way out of trouble. So there's plenty of reason to think that. And Denver, I would definitely say, is in a similar position. They've got a lot of homegrown talent. One big piece that they traded for in Aaron Gordon, but the rest of it's all kind of come up through their system for the most part. Some good veterans kind of on the fringes, but the main core is they brought them up on their own. And their GM Calvin Booth, he was in contention for the Kings GM position when he was open, and he actually stepped away from that because he kind of had that sense he was going to have that opportunity with Denver eventually, and he took over when Connolly left. So he's a good GM as well, very well regarded. Played in the league, really knows the game, and has an eye for talent as well, obviously. So I think that both teams are in similar positions where they're probably those kind of new core teams coming up in the West, and there's a couple others, right? I mean, Utah will probably be good for the years to come with a GM.
Oklahoma City Thunder
pieces.
Danny Ainge is a mad
Thunder,
scientist,
absolutely. The Thunder with Sam Presti. You've got a bunch of good young teams really ready to kind of come up into their own, especially as these older legacy teams get too expensive to keep together and the stars start to age away and fall off. I mean, we started to see some of those cracks in the armor, in the playoffs this year. I mean, the Warriors, obviously, they beat the Kings, and then the Lakers got past the Warriors. So, I mean, it's not that these teams have rolled over and gone away yet. There's still talent there, but you're kind of seeing the beginnings of them looking more mortal than they did in the past.
Absolutely. That changing of the guard is definitely happening. And, Pinky, I'm glad you shouted out OKC. That was where I was going to go next. OKC, and now I think you can throw the San Antonio Spurs into that, depending on how you feel about Mr. Victor Wembanyama. I'll give you my thoughts on him in a second, but I'd like to hear how you feel about what Sam Presti and OKC has done with what their core is, and Chet Holmgren playing this season. It'll be his rookie year, 1 year removed. And then do you think San Antonio can start doing something similar as OKC with a Victor Wembanyama draft pick?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Oklahoma City has positioned themselves brilliantly. I mean, they've got a good young group of players. You know, a lot of them have been drafted and kind of developed on their own, or they've been very opportunistic with trades and, you know, kind of absorbing other contracts and things like that. So they've got a great war chest of other teams' draft picks that they can throw in and really go after a big name to put them over the top and really jump into contention really fast. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is amazing player. I'm not sure if he necessarily should have been first team All-NBA. I thought that was a little high, but you know, nitpicking over which All-NBA team a guy's on, I don't feel like is worth getting too upset about.
Sure.
But he had a phenomenal season, and they almost made the playoffs this year. You know, if Holmgren can come back healthy, which is a question mark, right? I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he can do, but we have seen guys miss their whole rookie year and then come back just fine, like Blake Griffin.
Sure.
Missed his whole rookie year and then came back and won Rookie of the Year when he did play. So lots of good young pieces. Jalen Williams, the other Jalen Williams. They've got two guys named Jalen Williams.
Yeah.
You know, so they've definitely got a good core of pieces that are young and can come up together, and they have the assets to really get an impact player to surround them with in the future as well. And then the Spurs, you know, you look at their roster, they have some good young complementary players already. You know, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan. You know, they've got Devin Vassell. They've got good pieces, and I'm a big believer in Wemby. I mean, I think he's going to be, as advertised, I think he's going to be a game changer. I think he puts them in the playoff hunt year one. I don't know, with as stacked as the West is going to be, I don't know if they'll make it, but they're going to be in contention for it for sure. And we know that they've got a good, smart front office. We know they've got a good coach. Like, he's not going to be wasted there, right? They've got the infrastructure in that organization to maximize his potential. So I definitely think that the Spurs, it's unfortunate that they got to luck into yet another generational big man in the draft, but I think they're set up for a long run success. And they have like $40 million in cap space this summer, so they can add some veteran pieces around their young guys right away.
So, I mean, let's be honest. Everybody knows the NBA draft lottery is rigged. Wembanyama to San Antonio, while surface level may not seem like it's some kind of steal, any real NBA fan knows that's exactly where he needed to go. With the French connection of Tony Parker, Boris Diaw, Greg Popovich, like you said, another generational big. But I think the biggest thing, honestly, with him going to San Antonio is the fact that they will help him develop. One of the few organizations in the NBA that truly can develop talent and not waste what that potential can be. I know you just said that you believe they'll be competing for a playoff spot year one. I actually, not that I'm skeptical with them, Wembanyama. I think the skill and the talent level is all there. I think playing a full NBA season, though, is going to be rough on him the first year and a half or so. I think he's going to have some growing pains that first year and a half, maybe 2 years, before lights really click on and the Spurs really start taking off. Just body type, speed of the game. I know he's played in similar situations, dominated G League last year in their summer series. But I've seen some things over there with the French League where some guys who just aren't talented could body him around, move him out of position. So I think it's going to take him time to kind of get used to the game and be able to put on some of that mass that will be required to do a full 82-game season. Do you see any of that?
So I think some of it will be, well, one, I think that you may be overestimating how big the adjustment's going to be, just because we've seen time and time again, even the younger guys who came up in the international system are so much better prepared to step into professional basketball because they've been playing professional basketball. So the adjustment for the there's going to be a little adjustment, of course, just because you're going from the second or third best league in the world to the best. I mean, there's definitely a little adjustment still, but it's nothing like the adjustment from college to pros. Even in terms of the workload, the amount of games. I mean, these young guys coming from Europe are already professionals. They've already learned how to put in the work, take care of their bodies, manage their sleep, all those different pieces that you have to do that sometimes college kids are figuring out their rookie year. The other thing is just as far as the size, I don't see them playing him as a center his first year. I think he'll play essentially like a stretch four in his first year, and that takes away a lot of the concerns around his size and his mass and all that because he's not going to be banging down low and trying to body up guys. He's going to be coming in for weak side blocks. He's going to be shooting from the outside or taking guys off the dribble because he has the skills and the speed, and with his size, it's unfair. I think that there's always a handful of clips, and I know the ones you're talking about that kind of went viral where a big-bodied European guy who's like 35 years old and off seasons as a plumber is like bodying up and really banging him out of the way, right? But that's not going to be the way he's going to be used in San Antonio. So he's not going to be expected to go inside and like take Steven Adams to the hole, right? Like they're going to be smart enough not to use him in that way. Whereas his team that he was on last year didn't have a better option most of the time. It was just, you got to give it to him and make him do something. And that's going to help him out a lot, not being the only option. Or if, there is someone big who's kind of stonewalling him, he's got a bunch of good options to kick out to. Sure.
No, that's a great point. I guess I should clarify a little bit. I don't think he's going to struggle like bust kind of thing by any means.
No,
just more of a, Kevin Durant, I don't think a lot of people remember this, but his first 3/4 of his first year, maybe all the way through his first year, while he had moments, there were definitely games in between those moments where he definitely looked like he was still trying to figure some things out. Some of it was his size, some of it was, like you said, sometimes coming from college isn't necessarily the best route as far as being ready to go. And I just see a lot of that with Wembayama. But great points. You're right. The Spurs are smarter than to use him as some kind of old school post-up Yao Ming style veteran. So that shouldn't be an issue at all. Another topic, and Nathaniel here brought it up as well. What do you think about what the Mavs are trying to do this offseason and the idea that they want to bring Kyrie Irving back?
I wish I could tell you what the Mavs have been doing for the past year and a half. I have no idea because they've been making mistake after mistake in the most predictable ways. I mean, I think that, letting Jalen Brunson walk when they could have just matched and kept him and then traded him later if they didn't want to hold on to him, massive mismanagement of an asset. And then, trading for Kyrie it backfired way faster than even I thought it would, and I thought it was going to backfire pretty quick. I mean, You trade for him, and then you miss the playoffs, and in the ways that everyone said you would, that you can't defend anything, and that you're relying on two guys to score 70 points a night. It just doesn't happen every night, and I would love nothing more than if they just run it back, just as a fan of another West team. I think it'd be fantastic if that's their strategy.
Poor Luka. Poor Luka.
It's just fun as a Kings fan who suffered through so many years of incompetent management to be on the other side of it now, where it's like, hey, we've got a decent GM and a decent team. I'm not saying we're elite or great or flawless or anything like that, right? But it's just fun being on the outside. Yeah, it's just fun being on the outside.
Nudge fans can understand just as well, for sure. Yeah, we're right there with you. So, that is hilarious. It's that old adage, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. If you're going to let it happen a third time, which is what Dallas did, then you're just dumb. You watch what he did at every other stop.
Yeah. Anyone thinking Kyrie's the answer is on, fool me 5 times, shame on you.
Right. You put him in Rucker Park, I'm all game. You put him on any team, you go play Rucker Park, you want to see some EBL, done. I'm all for that. You want to put him on an NBA team and expect to win? Not sure what you've been smoking, but you should share it with everybody else because life's probably a lot more fun.
And here's the thing. There's situations I think that he could still be part of a winning team You just have to have a very specific roster construction around him with a bunch of other like good defenders and rim protection and things like that, because he's not going to stop anything on defense. And Dallas is so not built to optimize Kyrie Irving. I mean, you've got two ball-dominant guards who like to get into the paint. You don't have very much left to stretch the floor. You don't have anyone else defending. You don't have it's just a terribly constructed roster, and I love it.
Agreed 100%. And it pains me to say that because I'm actually a big Mark Cuban fan. I've liked him since he bought Dallas back in the day. Was a big Dirk Nowitzki fan, so Dallas has kind of always been a secret favorite of mine, if you will. And to watch them do this to Luka is surprising, to say the least. You speak about bad roster construction. How about Matt Ishbia coming in and pounding the table immediately to trade away half their roster for Kevin Durant, and where that leaves them going forward?
It's Kevin Durant, so I get it. Like, Kevin Durant is still amazing. Like, he's a great player. But he's also a guy who's had a couple of injuries. He's not young. You traded away a couple good, really good young players as part of that deal and mortgaged a really long time worth of draft picks. And especially when that new CBA came out right after all that, it's like, ooh, hope they win a title in the next year or two, because after that, they're not going to have a chance for a while. Like, it's definitely that new owner big splash. I mean, you see it all the time in the NBA, and the Kings owner, Vivek Ranadive, when he took over, he did the same thing. Like, I mean, it happens all over the place when new owners come in. They want to make a big splash. They want to put their mark on the franchise. They all think they're smarter than everyone else who's ever been an NBA owner. And so they come in and say, do this no matter what the cost. And then you get things like the Rudy Gobert trade, or, I mean, it's tough to say you overpaid for Kevin Durant, but I think that history might show it as at least a little bit of an overpay, if not a bad overpay.
Absolutely. So we're talking a lot about the West. There's one team in the East, actually I should say two, one a little bit more so than the others, that I'm excited to see what happens going forward as we're talking about kind of these young cores being developed and built. And Cleveland out east for me is at the top of that list. And depending on what Brooklyn can do in this offseason, I think they could be competing as well, kind of in that same idea. Is there anybody else out east that you would put into that category, or would you say those are pretty much the two teams there?
I think you're wrong about Brooklyn. I don't see them competing for a while. They are in a rough spot. I mean, they don't own their own picks, so they can't tank to build that way. I mean, they own a lot of other picks from Phoenix, but those are not going to be great picks, and they're not the best assets to build around. They're in a tough spot. They don't have a lot of room or appeal to bring in a bunch of guys. They don't have they've got Mikal Bridges, who I love, but there's speculation they could be looking to move him this summer. So I don't think Brooklyn's going to be a competitor anytime soon. I definitely think.
You think they might just start all over and just blow it up now that they've got Mikal as a piece that they could start over with? Then is kind of where you're leaning towards more so.
I think whether they keep Bridges or not, I think what they're going to try to do is, rather than bottom out, they're going to try to kind of rebuild on the fly and at least be somewhat decent. Because again, they don't own a lot of their own picks over the next couple of years because of that horrible Ben Simmons trade. They're in a rough spot. I mean, they've got that massive Ben Simmons contract just taking up a huge portion of their cap, and he's basically worthless at this point.
Yeah.
So they're in a really tough spot just from a roster building space, and I don't see anything positive really coming out of them for the next year or two. I mean, they made the playoffs this year, but most of that was based on the wins that were left over from before they blew it up at the trade deadline.
Absolutely. I like Cam Johnson too, so I just think those two pieces that they got from Phoenix might be able to go the New York Knicks kind of route, where you can sign some veterans, put some pieces around them, and rebuild on the fly like you're talking about. But you're right. I understand where that could be concerning as far as can they truly rebuild and make something different. You're going to say something about Cleveland, though. I apologize.
No, you're good. Cleveland, I agree with, though. Cleveland has a really great young core. It definitely, it's one of those things where they're at that point now that they've got their core built, that they need to improve on the edges, and how well they can do that is really going to be, what defines how far they can go. I mean, they've got their core pieces in place at this point. They're not going to be adding any more high draft picks. They're not going to be making a big free agent splash. They just don't have the room for that. But the way that they build around the pieces that they have, with Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, and I feel like I'm missing someone else there.
Garland.
It's really good.
Garland,
yeah. How they build around those guys and kind of shore up the bench and all of that, I think is going to be interesting to watch. But they've definitely got a good young core and a really bright future ahead. As far as other young teams that really have a chance to do some good things in the East, I'm trying to think, because I feel like there's some others. I mean, there's others that aren't there yet. It's more potential based. Like I really like what Orlando is building. They're a ways off still, but they've got some really good young pieces. So I do like what's happening there. And then I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I feel like there's one other team that I'm missing, but I mean, realistically, although we don't really think about it because they've been successful for a while, I mean, the core pieces in Boston are still pretty young.
Very young, and that's actually where I was going to go next. You've got the top three, if you will, in the East with Philly, Milwaukee, and Boston. Boston, I fully agree. That team's still young, but God only knows what they're going to do this offseason with the way the last two seasons have ended. Jaylen Brown wants to get paid. A lot of question marks as far as if the bench is where it needs to be, or do they need to look at going a couple different directions there. So Boston's got a lot of question marks, but I don't think any of those question marks keep them out of the top three. Milwaukee, if Middleton can't stay healthy, they may lose Brook Lopez this offseason. Drew Holiday is getting up there in age a little bit now. Does Giannis stay there long term with the new ownership, new coaching coming in? They've got a lot of questions. And then Philly is the exact same way. They're bringing in a brand new coach. Just announced today Nick Nurse is going to be coming in to replace Doc. You've got Embiid there, who a lot of people now are saying, while a great player, does not raise the talent of those around him. So you've got to put the right pieces around him for the roster to fill out properly and be able to contribute. Do they keep Greg Harden? We all know how Daryl Morey feels about Greg. I don't know why I'm going to say Greg. But I had Greg Oden in my head all of a sudden. I don't know where that was going to come from. But James Harden, thinking bust, I guess. I apologize. So with James Harden, and does he come back? Does he go back to Houston? Which I can't imagine why Houston would want him in any shape, way, or form. But so those three, I think, will all stay at the top of the East. Cleveland maybe can finally sneak in, depending on how they all grow this next year. But those seem to be the three for sure that will stay there. But they've all got huge question marks. Do you see any of those three teams solidifying their position this offseason to go into next season better than they were this year?
Boston's really the trickiest one, right? Because, I mean, realistically, I think what's most likely is that they just try to run it back. Now, a lot of it does depend on the Jaylen Brown contract negotiations because, I mean, he's eligible for Supermax, and I wouldn't want to pay him anywhere near the Supermax, but he's probably going to want
close
that.
To 5 years, $250, right? Somewhere in that range with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's closer to 5 years, $300 or something like that. It's something insane. Once you figure out the year-over-year escalations and stuff that get built in, it's a crazy number. And, especially for a guy who struggled a lot in this last series and has in years past as well. I mean, he's an excellent player, but, he's had some struggles in the playoffs. But at the same time, I mean, they were in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, like one game away from the finals, and you could easily make the argument, hey, if Tatum doesn't land on his ankle weird, that might have been a different game. I don't know if it would have been or not, but if you're running Boston, you could say, like, okay, Mazzulla didn't have time to build out his coaching staff. We're going to give him time to build out better assistants around him, be a little bit better prepared. He kind of got thrust into the drinking from the fire hose. So we're going to give him a year to kind of get his feet under him. Maybe make some tweaks to the bench. Try to get a little bit more help for Tatum and Brown. Like I could see them mostly running it back. I don't think that they're going to make a big change. Philly's going to be interesting because I think that it is probably more likely than not that Harden leaves. I don't think Houston should want Harden, but I think they do because, again, you've got a fairly new owner who's tired of losing, and he just wants to go back to winning games and getting the gate receipts that come along with selling more tickets. They've also talked about, there's been rumors that they would package some of their young pieces, even up into including Jalen Green, to get more established talent. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Houston goes all in on Harden and some other, poorly planned veteran move to try to win right away. But yeah, I think Philly, especially if they lose Harden, is in a difficult spot because they've got some rough contracts who, are solid players, but aren't the most movable assets. And kind of how do you get Joel Embiid the support, because he is a phenomenal player. I mean, no one denies that. And I mean, he won MVP this year, and, whatever hairs we want to split to decide. I mean, there was 3 guys who deserved an MVP this year. He was one of them. He won it. That's fine. I have no problem with it. But as we've seen both with Denver and now with Philly, just because you're an MVP doesn't mean you win the title that year. You need help. It's a team game. You need the support around you, especially in those key moments. And, how Philly gets that is going to be interesting to see.
I mean, finally, what do you think about Milwaukee? They're to me, they're the most hard team to predict because, I mean, Pinky and I both had them coming out of the East to represent the East in the finals this year. Now, obviously, that depended on some health, Middleton being able to play close to what he's capable of. But when you have Giannis, when you have Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez had one of his best years of his career. They had some good bench pieces, Bobby Portis, and so on. Grayson Allen even played well this year. For them to get bounced in the first round, 5-game series against the Heat. Now, obviously, Heat are going to the East or going to the finals representing the East. So it's not like they got bounced by a no-name, but definitely unexpected. What do you see from them this offseason going into next year? Do you think there's a chance Giannis does leave? I kind of always thought he would retire as a Buck, but new ownership and everything coming in, it seems like he might be slightly disgruntled. So that's an interesting thought.
I don't get the sense that he's disgruntled at all, or that he would demand out anytime soon. I mean, if he did, it'd probably be in another year or two. But I mean, realistically, Giannis is the type of dude who, if he got upset, I could see him just retiring and just walking away instead of going through the whole trade demand thing. Because he is beloved in Milwaukee and he likes it there. And if he's not happy with how it's going, doesn't see a path out, I could see him just saying, "All right, I'm good. I won MVP, I won championship, I did all these things. All right, I'm good. I've set up my family for generations. We're calling it a day." And he's the type of player that wouldn't really surprise me. I think that this is going to be a rough offseason for them. Again, going back to new owners and all the pitfalls that come along with that. You've got Giannis, so you're still going to be a competitive team, but they've got some tough decisions as far as, do they try to keep Lopez? Do they try to keep Chris Middleton? Are they even able to compete with the offers that, like Brook Lopez could get? We talked about the cap space of the Spurs. I love the idea of Brook Lopez to the Spurs, just to be the big body and defensive support next to Wemby. I think that makes a lot of sense. Give him like a 2 or 3-year deal, 2-year deal with an option, something like that, where you're not committing 5 years worth of money or anything crazy, but bring him in. So I think that the Bucks probably will take a step back. I'm also unsure about, I get why they fired Budenholzer, but I don't know that they improved their coaching situation. Young, sometimes they turn out great, sometimes they turn out a disaster. We don't know because they haven't been in that chair. And, Adrian Griffin has been around for a lot of years, well-regarded assistant. I just don't know if he's going to really take them to that next level compared to what Budenholzer did for them.
So I will say, I think everything that happened with Budenholzer and him being let go was deserved. He kind of earned that. The reason I say that is because if you go back all the way to his days in Atlanta, the mistakes he was making with, his bench, situational management late in games, none of these are new. And it doesn't seem to be things that he was really changing. And, you could say that they won the title despite some of his mistakes and they were able to overcome them, where this year it became a pitfall. I mean, a glaring mistake where you've got Jimmy Butler putting up that shot with 2 seconds left to win the game. To go into overtime and then them go on to win the game, and not have Giannis covering him. Those are glaring weaknesses that if you're not going to correct, I think is a reason for you when you have a championship caliber team to be let go. Doc Rivers, I think, is in the same boat. He's had a lot of talent over the years, and he's always underachieved with that talent. And he's no different than Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett living off of one championship for the rest of their lives. Kind of seems to be their MO. So I've always thought Doc was a little overrated. Really good coach, not a great coach. Don't think he's somebody that's going to carry you to a championship. And I felt like Budenholzer was kind of in the same boat. Good for a team to try and get them to learn how to win. Maybe not the right guy to sustain that greatness. But like you just mentioned, the risk then always becomes who you're bringing in. Are they are they going to be your Steve Kerr is really what it comes down to. And are they going to be able to take you from that really good to that great? So it will be interesting to see how those two teams, I mean, Nick Nurse, I feel is really good, not great. But maybe in a different situation, this team, maybe he can take that next step as a coach with the team. But Philly hiring him kind of surprised me as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think Nurse is a good coach. I think that he just kind of, his voice had lost the locker room, and it happens, and so that's why Toronto moved on. I think he's a good coach. I don't know if he's necessarily a great coach, but, I think he's probably an upgrade over Doc because I agree. I'm not a big Doc Rivers guy. I think he's very overrated when you look at what he's accomplished relative to the talent he's had. He's been a letdown more times than not. Whether or not Doc to Nick Nurse is enough of an upgrade, I don't know. I don't think it necessarily is. It is an upgrade, but how much, we'll see. Because there's a lot of those same concerns about Nick Nurse not adjusting and not, tweaking and not going into his bench and, all those same concerns you mentioned with Budenholzer. The funny thing with coaching is, when you win, if you didn't adjust, you made the other team play your game. If you lose, you failed to adjust. So a lot of it comes down to just, did you win or did you lose, right? Because Budenholzer did the same things in their championship year, but it worked because he had the other team trying to adjust to them, and it comes down to how well your team executes your plan and do they do the things. And so, yeah, he's probably a bit too stubborn and has some head-scratching decisions for sure. I think a lot of coaches do, but I think he kind of got the raw end of the deal there. But at the same time, I get if you want to move on, but that really is one of those things that just screams new ownership to me as well, because you don't move on from a coach that good and that successful without a clear plan of where you're going, and they clearly did not have that plan going into it. And that's where I see the mistake.
That's a great point. I am on record of saying that if Mike Malone does not get the Nuggets to a finals this year, they should seriously consider moving on. I've had my own criticisms of Malone and some of his in-game management. Specifically, easy example would be the 2 games in Phoenix, games 3 and 4, where he decided to continuously double Durant and Booker, and allowed those bench guys to have wide open looks, build their confidence, and escape with 2 wins that shouldn't have gone that way. Luckily, he adjusted. Game 5, Game 6, went back to more of single coverage, some flashes of doubles, but not consistently double teaming. I've had to eat some Mike Malone crow, and I am on board with him continuing to be the Nuggets coach going forward. He obviously has the locker room. That's never been a question I've had. I do wish he'd take a little bit more accountability at times as a head coach. He's one of the few head coaches in the league that can just continuously get on his guys and get away with it. And I think a lot of that has to do with, who his superstar is and just Nikola Jokic's personality as a whole that allows him to do that. It's almost a Pop and Tim Duncan type dynamic.
I was about to make that comparison.
Perfect. So you're on the same page as me here. And Mike Malone is he's from that Pop tree, is he not? If I remember correctly. So there's some bristling there. I believe he is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pinky. You can look it up. But I do believe he's one of the guys out of that Pop tree.
I mean, technically, because he was under Kerr, Pop to Kerr to Malone. I don't think he.
I want to say he started in San Antonio though, and moved with Kerr. I might be wrong there.
I might just not remember. I mean, Malone was a coach for Sacramento, and I was a big fan of his there, and was very mad when he got fired. So I feel like I know his background pretty well. I don't think he did in San Antonio, but I could be wrong. I definitely prone to forget things every now and then.
He was with the Knicks, and then he went on to the Warriors, and then the Kings, and then the Nuggets. Yeah, he's never.
Okay, maybe I'm just thinking of that from the Steve Kerr kind of tree is where I always got that from. But he's got some of that, that bristle kind of. I'm going to get on my team rather than I'm going to be the coach that says I could have done better mentality. And that doesn't always work if you don't have the right superstar around. So it helps him in that regard. Where I was going with all of this is with us talking coaching right now, I believe that two of the best in the league right now are in the finals with Kerr and Spoelstra. I think you can put Pop and Kerr up there as well. Is there anybody else you'd put in that top 3, 4, 5 other than those guys?
So outside of Malone, Spo, Kerr and
Pop. Obviously, Pop kind of gets grandfathered in regardless of what his teams have been the last couple of years just because of who he is and what he's done. I think Mike Brown, I think your guy, Sacramento's guy, is finally getting some recognition that is well-deserved. He kind of has gotten the short end of the stick at a couple different spots previously.
I mean, I'll just say he was not my top choice by any means. When the Kings announced their list of candidates, he was kind of right in the middle. But I was blown away. He was the perfect coach at the perfect time, just fit the situation and what the team needed. And he had a bit of what you're describing as well, where Fox and Sabonis really bought into what he was selling, and that allowed him to really push the team hard and kind of be a hard ass. I mean, that's kind of the key anywhere you go is you have to have a star player who also buys in and leads by example. I mean, Papa said many, many times that, having Tim Duncan allowed him to become the coach he was, because if Duncan hadn't been on board and hadn't been fine with being treated like anyone else, it wouldn't have worked. I think that goes in most great coaching situations. I mean, Steve Kerr, who, again, by the way, a guy who gets criticized by Warriors fans a lot for not adjusting. Steve Kerr, had the buy-in from his superstars, and so there's a lot of guys along those who are in that similar boat. Other great coaches in the league right now, there's a bunch of really solid coaches, the really great ones. The only other one that I hold a little bit higher than the rest, and I haven't really been as impressed the last couple of years, but overall I still hold him in high regard, is Rick Carlisle.
I agree with that. He's had some struggles the last couple of years. I mean, it doesn't help that he took over an indie team that was in, disarray. But that Sabonis Halliburton trade, I know a lot of Sacramento fans were not thrilled when it first went down. But I don't think in recent memory, can remember a trade that worked out that well for both parties involved. and was exactly what each team needed and each player needed, really.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a textbook win-win trade. I mean, it happens so rarely, but the way I look at it is if you went back, if you go to either fan base right now and ask, would you undo the trade? Neither side would want to undo it. Both sides are happy with it, which at the end of the day, both teams are happy. Both teams feel like they're in a better place. Both fan bases are happy with the trade. That's win-win.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Let's, I know I could chop it up with basketball for hours on end with you, so I'm going to move us forward a little bit here and help Pinky get into something that he can relate to a little more. Eastern Conference Finals. I have been saying all year, I have been saying all year with the Eastern Conference Finals, specifically the Boston Celtics, that they are the most inconsistent team I can remember in recent memory as a whole from game to game. And I have said Jason Tatum is the most inconsistent superstar in the history of the NBA. Now, like you said, he rolls his ankle first play of the game. That kind of takes some of that, was he inconsistent? Was he hurt? That kind of takes all of that out of the picture for Game 7. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see if he was going to show up for one of his brilliant Game 7s or if he was going to be, kind of lackluster, if you will. But that's been my assessment of Boston all year. Inconsistent as a team, and Tatum is the most inconsistent superstar that the NBA has ever seen. And that allowed them to be in a position that they never should have been in the first place with playing a Heat team that was arguably, possibly, the best team as a whole in the NBA as far as playing together for one another. What did you think about that Eastern Conference Finals?
The finals were a trip. I just want to go back to the idea of Tatum being the most inconsistent superstar in NBA history because I think that's wildly incorrect.
Really?
How old is Jason Tatum?
Hey, I'm not looking at his age right now. I'm looking at what he's done up until now. I think he's a superstar.
Okay.
I just think he's a wildly inconsistent superstar.
So he's 25. Okay.
Yep.
You know what people said about Jordan from ages 20 to 24?
Oh, absolutely. Kobe.
He was inconsistent, that he wouldn't show up, that he couldn't win the big one. Like, there was tons of that. I mean, it's ridiculous to put that label on a kid who's that young. Like, young guys are supposed to be inconsistent because they're getting used to the moment. Jason Tatum is a victim of his own success, that he's been so successful and he's been in so many bright light moments. I mean, you want to talk inconsistent? Can we talk about, well, I guess it's not inconsistent because James Harden consistently fails to show up in big moments, whereas Tatum sometimes shows up. So if you would think that that's
to drop a 51-point Game 7 and then come back in a Game 5, was it Game 4 or 5 against the Heat where he scores a total of 14? I can't remember a superstar, regardless of age.
James Harden.
Well,
James Harden will never drop 50 in an elimination game.
I agree. Now, maybe it's just me. I've always thought James Harden was incredibly overrated. I don't think he ever quite deserved the superstar status. Star for sure.
Who's been like MVP conversation year after year after year, averaging like 30 points a game. You think that's not a superstar? Like, yeah, he sucks in the clutch, and that's the argument. That's the argument. Your whole argument is that you can't be a superstar because you're not good in those clutch moments, but that's why
No. By no means is that the argument. I expect more for you. Harden just no-shows and doesn't play any defense. Zero defense. And I think the rules were bent to him for a good 2 to 3 years that favored him in such a way that allowed him to be considered as a better scorer than he actually is. I don't think that's Tatum. I think Tatum is a phenomenal talent. I think he plays both ends of the floor. I think he can raise the ability of his teammates around him. And so when he no-shows, it means more than when Harden would just disappear, which you expected.
I disagree. I think Harden's no-shows are much more impactful and much more frequent. And if we want to talk about inconsistency, like a player who can average like 30 points a game all season long and then regularly drop single digits in elimination games, like that's an inconsistent superstar in my book. Like,
let's just say,
I mean, I'm not going to disagree that Harden isn't inconsistent. I don't look at him in the same light as I do with Jason Tatum. I think Tatum's on a different level than Harden.
I did get to see a couple Tatum games this playoffs. Every time I watched, he was building a house, like, and it just like I didn't see it, but then like I'd look at his stat sheet the game I don't watch, and I'm like, oh man, he was really on fire. So again, he's young.
I will not deny that Tatum has hot and cold streaks, and the Celtics as a team have hot and cold streaks. They did it all year long, and they've been that way. So you're not wrong about that. I just disagree with labeling Tatum as the most inconsistent superstar in NBA history. I think that's a wild overreaction.
And again, it's just where I have him. I don't think Harden's on his level. So I understand what you're saying about Harden, but I've always thought Harden was overrated. I never look at him as somebody that could truly carry a team to a championship like I do Tatum's potential. So I understand what you're saying about Harden, and I won't disagree with that by any means. I think just what I see and my expectations for the two are completely different. And that's why I have Tatum labeled as such. And that doesn't mean I don't think he can grow and change still. I mean, like you said, that's the beauty of him being only 25. It's just a bummer that he can be so wildly dominant and then literally no-show in a situation where his team needs him the most. And his team, I feel like, has had more talent around him than Harden did as a whole at times. I don't think any of Harden's Houston teams were that talented.
Oh, my God. You are completely
PJ Tucker PJ Tucker. Who else?
Harden's Rockets teams were the closest anyone came to toppling the Warriors during their absolute peak. They came within 1/4 of eliminating them and going to the
Chris
finals.
Paul injury away.
To the Warriors. I mean,
Chris Paul doesn't get hurt, they probably win.
Yeah, Houston. Exactly. So you're talking about PJ Tucker and forgetting about Chris Paul. Come on, what are we doing here,
well,
man? Like, you're talking about
the
Chris
reason
Paul from 6 years
Chris
ago.
Paul's really good.
He was still absolutely elite.
If James Harden had played
really good
like he did this year, if James Harden had played like he did this year with those Houston teams, they win a title. If he wasn't ball dominant for 23 seconds of every shot clock, if he had looked to improve his teammates and make them better, they would have won a title down there. I have no doubt about that. But again, a lot of the scoring I feel like was traveling on every play. His two-step step back after picking up his dribble and having a dominant pivot foot and then being allowed to move that and everything else that the NBA did for his offensive game. There's just things that I'm always going to say he was overrated because of. Is he a great player? Yeah. Is he a superstar? I've never had him in that upper echelon, regardless of, regular season accolades. I don't think he's on a Kevin Durant level. I don't think he's on a Nikola Jokic or Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't think James Harden's in that breadth. So I think that's why I always go back to I think Tatum's closer to that echelon though than Harden ever was. And maybe that's just my own perspective and why I have more expectations for Tatum, and I see his inconsistency being more damning to the team than what Harden ever did. Because Harden's Harden. It's kind of like you said. It's like Kyrie. You get it and you expect it. Tatum does so much more during the course of a game other than just score that when he has an off-scoring night, I would expect him to be able to pick that up in another way to help his team.
I've always hated the beard.
If we want to nitpick things that guys get away with and all the stuff Harden got away with for years, and I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but a big part of Tatum's success is that he gets away with pushing off like every time he drives. Like he fully extends and pushes off his defender like every single time. So I mean, every star player gets away with a bunch of crap, and Harden was the master of manipulating the rules, and that was terrible for the game. I think I was not a fan of it by any means. So I'm not trying to be out here being a hardened defender, and I hate what you've done to me here. But I think you're underrating his peak here.
Maybe. Just recently I was told I drastically underrated Dwight Howard's peak because I felt like he never developed his game past what it was for his 3-year prime. So maybe that's just something I do consistently well.
Dwight Howard is one of the most underrated players of the last 20 years, probably.
Oh, no. Most overrated players. See, here we go again. That's topic for another day. But back to the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll have this Howard conversation another time, my friend, for sure. Back to the Eastern Conference Finals, though. How do you feel Boston put themselves in that position? Other than agreeing that they are an inconsistent team, what do you feel leads to some of those inconsistencies? Because really, they're the same team as they were last year. They just didn't play as much defense.
So some of it's definitely got to fall in coaching. I mean, obviously they had a big upheaval with the whole internal scandal, Udoka being gone, Mazzulla taking over, and I think what gets kind of underrated a little bit is that if Udoka had been gone immediately at the start of last offseason, Mazzulla wouldn't have been the guy. It would have been Will Hardy. I mean, they lost him to Utah, then lost Udoka, and we're just kind of left with Mazzulla, who wouldn't have been their top choice to be Udoka's successor. I think he did well in a pinch and did a solid job given the circumstances. I mean, there was a lot of people wondering, the over-under on Boston was like, how do you place that? How do you bet that? I mean, it was a huge question mark just because no one knew how they would weather that coaching change. And he mostly kind of kept them on track. They didn't make a massive step backwards from where they were last season, which is a huge accomplishment. But at the same time, on the biggest stage, in the biggest moments, I felt like there was times, especially going against Spo, where he was just really outcoached, which we talked about before. Spo's one of the best coaches in the league. Like, that's kind of to be expected from a first-year head coach who wasn't really the top assistant or anything like that, even going into the season. So I think that there is definitely a coaching element. I think Spo had his team better prepared to exploit weaknesses and things like that. I think that, part of how they came back was just that Boston does have the talent. I mean, they've got incredible players. I mean, Al Horford really had some incredible games, throughout the whole playoffs. I mean, his veteran presence there has been huge. Jason Tatum.
Underrated defensively still somehow as well.
Absolutely. Jason Tatum's, Robert Williams, Jaylen Brown had some good games. I mean, he had some struggles, but especially in key moments, but he also had some good games. And Derek White, I mean, that was just such a big addition. They got him last season, if I'm remembering correctly, and paid a decent price, but he has been huge for them. Just a smart player, consummate role player, Colorado Springs local guy, Yeah. So, I mean, they've just got a good, smart group of players who kind of know the roles and know what they're supposed to do and do it well about 50% of the time. So that's kind of how they ended up where they're at. I mean, they lost 3, won 3, and then a coin flip last game, they happened to lose. So, it's just one of those things where some of it falls on the players. There's some issues with the roster. They definitely need someone who can kind of control the game from a point guard position more than Derek White can. White is good at not stopping the ball and keeping it moving and playing some defense, things like that. But him and Marcus Smart, neither of them is ideal as your primary point guard. They could really use some help, but just kind of someone who can run.
Well, and bringing Brogdon in just didn't do what they had expected either for some reason. Nice chess piece to be able to put on the board, but not the starting point guard level that they had expected Brogdon to come in and be for him either. So they've swung and missed a couple times now, that's for sure.
And I don't know. If they brought in Malcolm Brogdon to be their point guard, that was their first mistake. Like, he's not a point guard. Like, he's not your floor general. Like, he's more of a wing. He's a wing scorer, and I mean, solid enough player, but I mean, he was hurt and hasn't been the same the last couple of years. But I mean, yeah, that was never going to be the silver bullet. I thought it was a good addition at the time, but it just didn't work out very well for him. And sometimes that happens. I mean, we saw that with a lot of teams in the playoffs this year, where the guys they brought in at the trade deadline to help them out disappeared when it mattered, or were unplayable down the stretch. I mean, look at the Lakers. I mean, that last game, Game 4, they didn't play Vando a minute. They didn't play Mo Bamba at all. I mean, a bunch of big name additions. Kings legend Tristan Thompson.
It's a good point. It's a good point. So do you feel like it was more, and I always hate saying this because it's never the full picture, but, cliff notes, if you will, do you feel that it was more Boston losing the series than Miami winning the series?
No, I think when a 8 seed beats you in the Eastern Conference Finals, it's because the 8 seed won the series. Like,
okay.
The better team doesn't just roll over and lose. I mean, I just don't paint it that way. I think that you got to give Miami their credit. They stepped up. They took it straight into the teeth of Boston, especially those first couple of games, and just put Boston on their heels where their back was up against the wall. And there's a reason that no team has come back from being down 0-3. It's hard as hell to beat any team 4 games in a row, unless you're the Nuggets and playing the Lakers.
The only team that was down to have a home game was the Boston Celtics.
That is true. The other thing that I think is interesting that I think not a lot of people are giving credit to or discussing, which kind of blows my mind, but I mean, in today's media world, it makes sense because it's not going to make the story as good. Miami was the 1 seed last year in the East, and they lost to Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals on a Jimmy Butler 3-point shot that came up just short. So it's not like Miami came out of nowhere. It's not like this is an overhauled roster. It's pretty much the same team from last year. They just had some injuries, some struggles throughout the course of the year that put them in a position to have to play into the playoffs rather than being kind of at that top where a lot of people kind of had predicted them to begin the year. So while they are an 8 seed, they're not your standard 8 seed, if you will, in that sense as well.
I'll disagree. And I agree with what you're saying just in terms of they've got a lot of guys who have been there, have the experience, aren't going to be afraid of the moment. That's definitely critical. But I watched a fair bit of Miami just because, I've got League Pass. They tend to be an early game. Click it on at 5 while I'm waiting for the West Coast teams I want to watch to play at 8. Miami sucked this year. That was a god-awful basketball team. Like, they were not the team that we have seen in the playoffs at all. I mean, there's that level of teams turning it on for the playoffs, but this is a whole different level. I mean, Miami lost their play-in game to the Hawks, and the Hawks are also bad. Like,
yes,
Miami has no business being here, and especially without a player as important as Tyler Hero. Like, that's a huge piece to be missing. And they've still been good. I mean, even their big acquisitions like Kevin Love, like, has he played any time in the last month? Like, I mean, it's just one of those things, right? Like he had one game where he came in and gave him a few good minutes, and that was, I think, it. Miami was dog shit most of the year. Like, they were awful. They were miserable to watch. Like, just a bad team. I couldn't, like, it was, you watch the team and you're like, how is this even a team that's going to make the playoffs? And for them to be in the finals is unreal. I mean, they have turned it on in a way that I've never seen. So I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, they've been there, but they're missing a 20-point per game scorer in Hero. Like, basically their second best offensive weapon. Jimmy Butler's been up and down, even though they're making the finals. Like, he's had some really rough games, had a really up and down season. They've had so many things going on. Like, it's amazing that they're at where they're at.
I fully agree with you there. Moving on to the finals then. We've got the Denver Nuggets, who went 5 games against the Timberwolves. They went 6 games against the Suns. They went 4 games against the Lakers. Then you look at Miami. They went 5 against Milwaukee, 6 against New York, 7
They did
against
6
Boston.
against Milwaukee.
5.
Was it
Gentlemen's
5?
sweep against Milwaukee. Which is part of the reason it was such a big deal, or even more of a big deal, if you will. But when you look at those two teams' path to the finals, and maybe this is me being a homer, and if it is, so be it, I do feel like the Nugs played better competition on their road to get to where they are than Miami did on their road to get to where they are. Now, saying that, I don't think there's necessarily a huge difference. I think you could say New York and Minnesota are very similar. I think you can say that the Suns and Milwaukee are somewhat similar in the fact that they're top heavy due to injury or lack of depth. And then Boston and LA, you could kind of say are somewhat similar with having multiple pieces to run at you. What do you think about each team's road to the finals?
I don't think you can ever say that you had an equal difficulty path to the finals when you're the 1 seed versus an 8 seed. Like, I hear what you're saying as far as the level of talent on the teams and all that, but the Denver Nuggets never had to go through the best team in the division or the best team remaining to get to the finals because they were the best team start to finish. Miami, like I said, they lost to the Hawks for their play-in spot. Like, they had an uphill climb to end all uphill climbs. Like, they had to go against the 1 seed in the first round and beat them. They had to go against the 3 seed and be, like, I think that they had a much tougher road to the playoffs, just in terms of, you know, home court advantage issues, you know, just the quality competition. I think that Miami had a tougher road. That's not to discount what Denver did. It's just that Denver was the best team in the West all year long, and they've been the best team all year long in the playoffs, and they've dispatched what's in front of them. Like, it's not taking anything away, but I think that you can't say that their paths were similar when one was a 1 seed and the other was an 8.
I like that. I like that.
I heard Rich Eisen giving the Nuggets some shit about that. And he's like, I don't understand how you can play this, underdog when you're the 1 seed. He's like, I don't know how they're doing it, but they're playing the underdog card against the Lakers, and they're the 1 seed.
I mean, majority had the Suns winning the series. If you looked at the majority of who was picking to win, they were picking the Suns. Majority I saw were also picking Lakers over the Nuggets. So that's how you get away with playing the underdog continuously, is when, regardless of your seed, people keep picking you to lose. It allows you to maintain a chip on your shoulder that probably shouldn't be there anymore.
No, for sure. I mean, I think that the way that the media has covered the playoffs as a whole, the way they haven't covered the Nuggets all season. I mean, they've covered them some, obviously, but not nearly enough. I as a Sacramento Kings fan, I share a lot of similar feelings to how Nuggets fans feel, just in terms of the way that media coverage works and the way that the NBA handles their coverage and promotion of teams. I think that they do a terrible job of promoting their own product by relying just on the biggest names in the biggest markets, because then you have a situation like this where there's a million amazing storylines and 2 really good teams about to play a finals, and you've set it up to where most of your casual viewers know nothing about them because you haven't been covering them.
Great point. So, put you on the spot here, Greg. How do you see this finals going?
I'd say Nuggets in 5.
That's what I said.
I think that Miami's good enough and well enough coach that they'll take at least 1. I think that Denver takes home the title, though. I mean, I don't know how you can watch any of the Nuggets games throughout the playoffs and then watch even the best Miami games, Miami versus Boston, the best games of that series, and think that the Nuggets are not the better team. Now, a million things can happen. It's not an absolute lock. I'm not betting the mortgage on it or anything like that, right? I mean, they still got to play the games, but I think if I was a Nuggets fan, I'd feel pretty excited. I think that the Heat are. I told Bingy this last week. I think Nuggets fans should be happy that they got the Heat and not the Celtics. I think the Celtics would have been a much tougher matchup.
I couldn't agree more. I said Nuggets should want the Lakers over the Warriors. I just felt like that was a
100%.
much better matchup this year. And I said the same thing for a couple different reasons. We wanted the Heat because we wanted home court, first and foremost. If Boston won, we would have lost home court, and that would have been a bit of a kick in the nuts. Boston had the better record this year by 4 games, if I remember correctly. So they would have gotten home court there. And then secondly, Boston, while I feel like Denver's more talented top to bottom, and I would take Denver's 2 superstars over Boston's 2 superstars, the way they're both playing right now. Rosters are constructed very similarly, with the 3-and-D type guy, deeper benches, and defensive-minded teams that don't necessarily always play defense. There's a lot of similarities there between the Nuggets and the Celtics. So I agree with you there, absolutely. I think the gentleman's sweep is kind of what I'm leaning towards too right now. Nuggets in 5. I could easily see Miami getting 1 at home, going back to Denver and closing it out in Game 5. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. But I was talking with somebody today, and they were trying to explain to me how Miami as a team is better, and they do things the Nuggets don't do. And I looked at them, and I was a little confused because I said Denver does all the same things Miami does. They just do it at a higher level, is the way I see it. We've got guys 3-and-D. We've got role players playing specifically their role, and they're not mad about it. They actually thrive on it. And the ability for matchups, I see Denver having a much better time. If you're going to put Adebayo on Jokic, and you want Jokic to guard Adebayo, that's probably the easiest matchup Jokic is going to get throughout the playoffs. Adebayo's not going to shoot threes. He's not going to try to post him up a whole lot. So that gives Jokic a bit of a break on the defensive end. You can run 2 or 3, maybe even 4 different guys at Jimmy Butler. From Aaron Gordon to KCP to Brown to Brown, the rookie coming off the bench if you really want to throw some additional minutes at him. And then you kind of spread the rest of that out with, Caleb Martin. Sounds like Hero will be back for Game 3 as anticipated right now, but he's definitely going to have some rust to knock off. So I like what Denver has the ability to do here as I go down, top to bottom. It feels like Miami is just a lesser version of the Nuggets.
I'm not sure if I would agree that they're similarly constructed. Just because, they do have some similarities, sure, but Denver plays such a different style where it's so centered around Jokic and what he does versus, Miami's not running their offense through Bam, right? It's a very different setup. And kind of to your point, going back to what they have Bam do on offense, which I do think gives Denver a big advantage. The biggest thing for Denver is just that they do have the size and the length and the switchability on the wings to cover, Gabe Vincent and Martin and Jimmy and all the different pieces that Miami has. Those guys have been phenomenal, and it's not to take anything away from them, but the Nuggets have, Jamal Murray, Bruce Brown, MPJ. Aaron Gordon. Like they've got a lot of really switchable guys who can do a lot of good things, and at least put a body on some guys. So it's not to say that all of them are elite defenders, but they have a solid team that's built to be able to play defense.
I just see Denver being a team that's like they're one of the most efficient on offense, and I just see them like they're not going to do what the Celtics did and live and die by the 3. They're going to put the ball in the paint, take the ball, kick out to Brown, kick out to KCP, kick out to Porter. Like it's hard when you play a team like Denver that is one of the best in offensive efficiency. It's going to be tough to keep up.
Yeah, it's funny because I was kind of criticizing Malone going into the playoffs that the Nuggets have good 3-point shooters, but don't shoot very many threes compared to league average. I think that there's an opportunity for them to do more, especially in regular season. In the playoffs, though, the variability can kill you. We just saw it with the Kings. The Kings had an amazing season, have a ton of great 3-point shooters, and they had a couple of games where they just could not shoot for shit against the Warriors, and it cost them the series. Guys who were career good shooters and season-long good shooters, not fluky, streaky guys at all, just suddenly went cold, and that happens in the playoffs. Anyone can have a bad game anytime, and you don't have 82 games for it to all balance out. You've got 4 to 7 games for it to balance out, and it doesn't always happen that fast. So there is some benefit to not being reliant on the 3-point or, being able to rely on, Jokic finding cutters or Jokic going to the basket or Jokic hitting fadeaway threes or
That Samba shuffle is something else, man. I think that is one of the things that the Nuggets have been able to avoid that every other team in the playoffs up until this point has suffered at least once, is having a full game of an off night. And Denver's had some quarters here and there that you can point to and say, boy, that was ugly. But they haven't had a full game where they were just bad. And I think that helps mentally speaking going through an entire playoffs where you can say, yeah, we've had some down moments, but we haven't had a game where we were just trash. And they can always build on that and rely on that, where you've had other teams, Celtics, like you said, your Kings even had a couple. Golden State no-showed against the Lakers. Lakers no-showed a couple games against the Nuggets. How do the Sixers beat the Celtics without Embiid? And then go on to lose the series. So I think that's one of the things the Nuggets can kind of hang their hats on as being the best team in the league up until this point through the playoffs, is the fact that they've only had quarters that were bad, not full games. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would fully lean into that, just because, they did have that stretch at the end of the year, right, where they really did not look good. And I think that's where a lot of the doubters came from. The last month or so of the season, they really had several full games in a row where they kind of looked like crap, and people were kind of like, what's going on? Maybe they were just getting out of their system. But yeah, for the most part, throughout the season, they've been fantastic. Throughout the playoffs, they've been steady and consistent and good. And that does go a certain distance as far as the mental strength of a team. Just that belief in yourself and that ability to bounce back from a bad game that, hey, if we had a rough quarter, we're just going to turn it on the next one. Or, hey, we lost that game, we're just going to go win the next one. Like, there's definitely something to be said for that element, especially that mental element of just being able to bounce back and have belief in yourself.
Pinky, you got anything else for Greg before I finish up here with a final question / thought for him?
No, man. Greg's on point. I love Greg. He's my dude. I always like chopping it up with him when we talk basketball. I don't know as much as either one of you guys. I'm learning, but it's good. It's good.
We need to definitely somehow get together, whether it's on here again or just at a bar having some drinks and discuss this Dwight Howard thing, because that's always a fun one. But I want to get you out of here on
air. So we should do that on air so people can hear how wrong you are.
Oh, that's how. Okay, yeah, we can definitely do it on air then. You want to go down that road? Absolutely, my guy. But here, I might get some points back from you with this. And I want to end on this because I do want to give some love to your Kings and the season they had, and the idea that you mentioned on how the NBA is promoting and lack thereof, really, with specifically West Coast teams as a whole. I think De'Aaron Fox is a top 5 point guard in the league right now, and he's getting not nearly enough recognition for what he did for that team and his overall skill level. You mentioned SGA. He seems to be getting a little bit more love. I personally actually like De'Aaron Fox a little bit more than I like SGA right now, and the potential and where they can go. How do you feel about his jump this year and what De'Aaron Fox was able to accomplish for your teams?
There were a lot of questions coming into this season around De'Aaron Fox because he's been inconsistent over the years. Tended to start the season slow and would kind of come on towards the end of the year. Had some time missed with injuries and things like that. So there was kind of the question of, is he a player who can really make that leap and be elite? And it felt like time was kind of running out, just based on his age. Like, the guys who make the leap after age 25 or 26 is a pretty small group. Most guys have made the leap by then. And especially with Sabonis and the way that they built the roster out with shooters all around them, it felt like it was kind of a make or break year for Fox. And he stepped up more than we could have ever hoped. He stepped it up, not just offensively and with his consistency throughout the year, but also on defense. He played much better defense, much more engaged, much more active, and really showed himself to be a capable defender. I don't think he's necessarily hit his ceiling yet. I think he still has room to continue to grow, but he took such a leap forward, and I loved that he got the recognition of making his first All-Star team. Love that he made All-NBA, and the NBA is one of those things where, right or wrong, the pedigree plays a big factor in perception and the accolades that you get going forward. So once you've made your first all-star team, it's much easier to continue making them. Once you've made All-NBA, it's much easier to continue making them. So I think that he may still be a little slept on because he was on TNT 2 games this year, ESPN 0 games this year. And for most of his career, he hasn't been on at all. But, he won, he got the All-Star nod, he got All-NBA, and he won the NBA's first ever Clutch Player of the Year award. I think his recognition is starting to come. People are seeing what he's doing. I mean, he was such a killer in the fourth all year. And, it doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot at this point just because, people move on from first rounds pretty quickly. But he played most of that first round series against the Warriors with a fracture in his finger, which really, anyone who had watched him all year could see how much it was impacting him. Just his shot wasn't as reliable, and I think that really was
on his shooting hand. It wasn't just a broken finger. Broken finger on his shooting hand. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And he was the it could be argued a little bit, but I'm going to say that he was the primary defender on Steph.
Yep.
So to be able to do that and play offensively at the level he did, lead that team the way he did, I've been a big fan of his since he came out of Kentucky, just because he reminded me of a Derrick Rose type with his explosiveness and his quickness and his ability to get downhill when he needed to, but then out of nowhere pull up and give you a little floater or a 10 to 15 foot little jumper in the lane. There's just so many things about his game coming out of Kentucky that I like. So I've followed him closely over the years. And to see him take a step this year that he did, as big as it was, I think played a huge factor in the Kings being able to take the step they did as a whole and move forward.
100%. No, he was everything we hoped he would be, and it was a nice validation for anyone who had still held on to that belief in him, and it was so nice seeing him succeed here in Sacramento as opposed to after being traded away or signing somewhere else or whatever else might be. It's nice when your homegrown guy that doesn't have the best start to his career kind of figures it out and brings it all together, and you get to enjoy the success because you've been through the journey with them. And we talked about it a little bit before, but a big part of that is just that he fully bought in. He trusted Mike Brown. He was willing to put in the work. He engaged on both sides of the floor. Defense is 80% effort, 90% effort. Right, the guys who try are better defenders than the guys who don't. So the fact that he stepped up on that end, a lot of that's just that buy-in piece. And I was thrilled with what he did, and I can't wait to see what he does building on that now that he's also got some playoff experience under his belt. Because everyone always talks about, all the players talk about that people can tell you what the playoffs are like, but until you've been there and felt that intensity, you don't know how to prepare for it. And now that he's got that, now he can take that one more step forward and continue to build.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love it, Greg. It is always fun. I don't get to go this deep dive on basketball that often, so it is a huge pleasure for me. You are always
Pinky's
welcome back
excited he got to
anytime.
take
You
the
know
night
it.
off.
Right, yeah, yeah. Sit there and hang out. Um, Greatly appreciate it, my guy. Always a pleasure. Anytime you get an opportunity or you just feel like you want to come on and chop it up and just tell me how wrong I am, come on back.
Well, Greg, you're
Sounds
gonna
good,
be
bud. Thanks.
you're gonna be getting back on the King's Herald podcast too, right?
So we have a couple of podcasts currently ongoing. We've got the King's Herald Show with Jerry Reynolds. Jerry Reynolds, former GM and coach of the Kings, also was longtime color commentary for the Kings. He is on one of our main podcasts. We also sponsor the King's Pulse podcast, and then later this summer, I will be part of another podcast that we're launching. More details to come, but it should be fun.
Hey man, if you need a hype guy, I can just come in and hype up the Kings. I really probably can't do it. I'll be like, Sabonis is God. That's about all I got. But I like Sabonis a lot. So I love that guy. And give me some Sasha.
But yeah, in the meantime, we're at thekingsherald.com. We're a fully independent website. So we run it all ourselves. We've got, articles, podcast, analysis, all of the good stuff. So ramping up for the draft and then free agency and all the fun of the NBA offseason. And we try to put it in the context of kind of everything else going on. But, if anyone's ever curious what's happening with the Kings, we're the go-to spot for that.
Hell yeah.
Like I said before, if you couldn't tell just by him chopping up with us for the last, hour and 30 minutes, Greg he's got some basketball knowledge. And he doesn't mind telling me I'm wrong. So if you enjoy either of those things,
and he
go
does it
follow
so
my guy and
politely,
pay
Caleb.
attention.
He does it so politely. I
Yeah,
tell you,
there's
go fuck yourself.
Like Pinky, right?
He does it so nicely.
Look, the conversation wouldn't be any fun if we sat here and just said, "You're absolutely right. I fully agree with you." Like, the fact that you've got different opinions and thoughts is what makes this enjoyable. So, and the fact that Greg can, say it in a way that sounds intelligent and makes sense is a big plus compared to a lot of people out there. So we appreciate that.
Greg,
cheers. Thank you.
You're
again.
welcome to hang out if you want, Greg, or you can drop off. It's all good. We will not feel bad. But we got some hockey talk.
I got nothing to do. I'll hang.
Yeah, if you're
talking hockey, I don't know how much I'll pitch in. I'll become the Pinky at this point. I'll just sit back and enjoy it. But
look, we mention it because I've convinced Pinky over the years that all sports matter. So it gets talked about to the extent that we're in the playoffs and the Stanley Cups. As far as our knowledge and our in-depth analyst expertise, if you will, it's not much.
Hold on. So at this point, I'm just trying to make sure that this network, the MHRT network, has something other than Broncos coverage. That's literally my goal at this point.
We gave him an hour and a half of basketball. What more you want?
We did. And we did it well. I think there's a lot for everybody in that an hour and a half. All right. Stanley Cup Finals, which has been discussed as the toughest trophy in all of sports to win. It is the coolest trophy in all of sports to win. That's not even debatable.
No, not debatable at all. It's by far the coolest trophy in all of
it. Is amazing. It is amazing. The fact that literally the whole team gets imprinted on the cup until there's enough of them and then they remove the ring and they put it in the Hall of Fame. But until that point, your name is on that cup. Even if you don't win it that next year, that next person goes oh, damn, that guy won a cup. That's amazing.
Well, and then you get it. Everybody in the organization gets it for 24 hours to do with whatever they want with it, which is also just insanely absurd.
Don't give me the cup for 24 hours.
That's by far the best part. There are so many good stories.
The Cup has seen some things. Absolutely.
The Cup's seen more things than all of us combined, guaranteed, for generations on generations. Like, the Cup isn't allowed to talk.
You know, I got to throw this out there. I've got my 18-year-old literally been enjoying his graduation presents and bought himself a JBL speaker.
Okay.
This thing literally, like, I can hear, like, word for word what anybody's saying in the basement. Like, he's in the basement, and I can hear it up here, like, just like I was listening to it.
Does he know
It's
that?
disgusting.
Have you informed him of this?
Oh, he knows. He's come up and, like, just started playing music, being like, you feel that? You feel that, Dad? Oh, I got to let him know to keep it down.
Yeah, do that. Back to the Cup. What do you got? Finals.
I'm excited.
I'm going Florida in 6.
Man, I think this is going 7, man.
No.
I think it's going 7.
I really do. I think Vegas has been a little inconsistent throughout the playoffs. I think they've kind of let their guard down a couple times. And I think Florida is playing just an insane level of hockey right now.
All right, Clayton, get some good sleep, my man. Much love to you.
Clayton's putting in them long hours recently.
That's nasty.
More power to that guy.
Vegas has played some good hockey throughout these playoffs, though. They really have.
I'm not
Florida's
saying they
played
haven't.
some good hockey too. I don't know enough about each team. All I know is whoever wins, it's the first Cup in franchise history. I love that. I love that storyline. Neither team has won a Cup.
All I know is that I hope Vegas never wins a Cup, as long as the Maloofs are partial owners.
I mean, I can understand that sentiment from your standpoint for sure.
Former Sacramento Kings owners are partial owners of the Vegas franchise, so I hope that team.
They put you guys in Sacramento at such a high, and then bailed on you so terribly that's
a deep cut. That's a deep cut.
I mean, there's got to be a love-hate relationship there, Greg, isn't there?
They're not how the Kings got to Sacramento. They're not how the Kings got to Sacramento.
No, but I mean, they gave you all those glory years with Weber and Bibby and Stojakovic, and
they wrote the checks. They didn't give anything, though. I'm not crediting them. No.
So I think that answers my question. Sounds like
an ounce of credit. Pure hate.
I think we'll need to get our boy Cody on here to talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup, because obviously our knowledge of both the Panthers and the Knights is very limited. Very limited.
Well, I mean, look, this is the story that I've been following that I love, and I think it's funny that everybody counted them out so easily. And it's similar to Miami Heat in a lot of ways. They were the 1 seed last year, President's Cup winners, got bounced in the second round in epic fashion, came back with pretty much the same team this year through injuries and just not playing well throughout the season for one reason or another. Fell to the 8 seed.
They're an 8 seed as well.
Yeah, got Kachuk late in the season at the trade deadline, if I remember correctly, which was a big piece added. They go and they beat Boston in the first round. Boston had the best regular season in NHL history as the 1 seed. They beat Boston. They come out the second round. They go ahead and they beat why am I drawing a blank?
Well,
I can't remember.
They beat the Hurricanes to get to the Cup.
Right.
Maple Leafs.
Maple Leafs. Thank you. No, it wasn't the Maple Leafs, did it? Was it? Did Florida beat the Maple Leafs? That didn't sound right. Look it up, stat guy. I could do this.
We should be better at this. Sorry, Greg. Sorry, buddy.
This is
what kind of operation you're bringing me into,
but we don't know about. Who'd they beat, Pinky?
Maple Leafs, baby.
Okay, nice, Pinky. So beat the Maple Leafs, go on and beat the Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Finals, go on to the Stanley Cup. Second time in franchise history they've been there. They were there in '96, I believe. Vegas has also been there one other time 2 years ago. Did not
No,
win.
they were there their inaugural season.
Was it 2017?
It was their inaugural season. They made it to the Cup as an expansion team.
I think it was 17 they came into the league. I was thinking it was a couple years ago.
2018.
18. Okay. Well, they've been there before and didn't win. So, like you said, one of these teams is going to win their first cup. I am pulling for Florida. I like the story more. I love what they did those first couple games against the Hurricanes, the 4 overtime, almost 5 overtime game, overtime in game 2.
Vegas is like my second town, though. So, like, I don't – like, it doesn't hurt me if Vegas wins. I know as an Avs fan I shouldn't say that, but I like Vegas, so.
I believe Stanley Cup starts Saturday. Is that right? NBA starts Thursday. Stanley Cup starts Saturday, I believe.
I believe that is correct. So those teams get a little bit more rest than the Heat do, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, the Heat should have gone ahead and finished it in 4 instead of letting it go to 7. That's on them.
Right. Yes, the first Stanley Cup game is Saturday at 6 p.m.
So maybe we can sneak Cody on next Tuesday, and he can give us a rundown after probably have the first 2 games by then. Cody just jumped in here. He's rooting for the Panthers. There you go. Cody's still around. Cody's our hockey insider, Greg, buddy of ours that gives us the rundown on hockey.
He knows. He pronounces the names correctly. He knows how good they are.
No,
yeah.
If he's got all the names correct, say no more. That's all the credentials you need to be a hockey expert. Like,
sometimes I just call guys by their first name, like Igor. Yep, I got him.
So yeah, we're all pulling for Florida. It sounds like I am saying Florida in 6. I think it might even be 5. But I'm going to say 6.
It's going 7. Going 7.
I don't see it, Pinky. I don't see it.
All right. I know that wasn't a lot on hockey, but at least we covered it.
Yeah, that's all we got today. Hey, hockey fans, just be happy you're not baseball. All right? Just be happy you're not baseball.
Although, I mean, Atlanta's up and down right now. Atlanta Braves are my team, so we'll check in here once we get to the dead season.
Yeah. In a couple weeks, it'll be only baseball unless we make up some topics, and we'll
when all the good sports are done playing.
Yeah, exactly. Greg, you'll love this. We have gotten so disgusted with the Rockies. I just don't have a baseball team anymore, which is partly why we don't talk about it, because I've given up watching it for a little bit. Pinky straight went old school and went back to like 5th grade, and he's reading for the Braves again on TBS. So he went back before Rockies even existed and went back with that fandom. I'm just in the dark with everything, not even caring.
I just got to go get my Braves hat and my Braves jersey, and I am in, baby.
Now, we have openly stated, if the Rockies are ever sold and the Monforts are no longer owners, we're right back to being fans. We just can't support trash anymore is what it's come down to. Full disclosure.
I get it. I grew up an A's fan, and about 10 years ago I made that same decision that I just couldn't continue to care and get hurt by crappy ownership. And so I gave up, and given everything that's happened in the last decade, I feel pretty good about that decision. Like,
yeah,
I couldn't name more than like 10 baseball players. Like, it's worked out. Like, I have free time, and I just don't care about an entire sport that I used to have to keep track of.
So true. Cody said Panthers in 5, Pinky. Just so we're clear, I think I'm on the right track here again.
Oh, yeah, the Vegas stadium is going to be great for the A's. The A's are moving to Vegas, if you didn't know, Greg.
I'm aware that they're trying to. I also know they kind of jumped the gun on the announcement, and didn't actually have financing in place, and Vegas is actually offering less financing than Oakland has offered for years. But
yeah,
that's all I
there's
know
a lot
about
of things that are going to backfire on Oakland, I think, with all of this. But I mean, the city didn't do the team any justice. The team didn't do the city any justice, and the players are getting screwed over in the meantime. So, pretty sad situation that baseball is allowed to continue to happen over the last decade or so.
I would put it much more on the owners than the city, but the city is not.
Oh, agreed. I will absolutely agree with that for sure. For sure. I'm always going to blame the billionaire or the multimillionaires first, especially when I don't feel private citizens should be funding your endeavors in any shape, way, or form. So taxpayer dollars to stadiums, I think, is a complete joke. But again, another topic for another day.
All right.
That we could go down a rabbit hole on for sure.
Let's squeeze in just a little bit of NFL.
We could talk about that instead of baseball in the summer.
Little bit of NFL here. We just crossed over the threshold.
100 days in, 100 days away.
15 Sundays since the Super Bowl. We have 15 Sundays left until the first game of the season. What are you most excited about? Or what team are you the most excited about? Nobody jump in here. It's fine.
So I'm a Niners fan, and this is how long it's been since I've been on the podcast. Last time I was on, Caleb was talking about how Deebo Samuels could never be a number one wide receiver or a number one receiver option in fantasy. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to bring that up again because that take has aged really well, Caleb. But I'm excited for my Niners.
Number one, just per se. He's upper echelon. I don't know if I would call him a number one receiver in the league still.
I didn't say
I don't know if I go that far.
I didn't say the number one. I said number
I'm not
one
saying I wouldn't put
for
him
a
as
team or
number
fantasy.
Yet. I wouldn't put him as a number. Even in fantasy, I don't know if I quite call him a number one. He's on the cusp, but he's not quite in that upper echelon, I would say still.
In fantasy,
we had much stronger takes
really
last time around.
Hey, look, I'm more than happy to eat my crow, Greg, and say I was wrong. Deebo is good. I'm still torn on if he's an elite receiver or not. I don't know if it's a product of the quarterback play or the play calling or just him as an individual. He's an elite talent. I don't know if he's an elite wide receiver. Okay. But I will say that my take a couple years ago, I will agree, has not aged as well as I had hoped. He's definitely proven me wrong as far as being a phenomenal talent. That's for sure.
Absolutely true.
I just had to give you some crap.
Hey,
but no, I'm excited for my Niners.
Sam Darnold's about to be your starting quarterback for the season.
I mean, for at least 1 week of the year, probably. I mean, everyone's going to get a turn.
Sam's going to ball out this year. I maintained it since they signed him. I believe he wins the job in camp, and I believe he balls out under Kyle Shanahan finally.
I think you're wrong. I would be very surprised if he's the one who emerges from all this. I think that it all depends on how he recovers from surgery and his recovery and all that. I think it's Brock Purdy's until someone else steps up and proves they're better. But I like that they've got three good options that give them a lot of different looks to look at, and especially if Purdy's not 100% right away or isn't the same when he comes back. I think it's easy to discount what Purdy did once he stepped in, but having watched the majority of those games, that dude's a starting quarterback in the league and a really good one. So I'm definitely a believer in him. I still love the idea of Lance as far as his potential and his arm and all that he could do. I love the idea of bringing in Darnold as insurance. And honestly, I don't really care that much who wins the quarterback battle. I trust Lynch and Shanahan and their staff to figure it out. They've had pretty good luck with figuring out who to play at quarterback. Like just the success they've had there, I trust them. So I'm just excited about them because I think they've got a great team. Mm-hmm.
Just gotta get over the
I think
hump.
they've got a really great team, and if they can get some sort of consistency at the quarterback position, I think they're going to be really good again. So
I think Darnold is the most talented quarterback on that team, and I think the Niners have a roster that's just as good as Philadelphia.
I think you make an
I've
argument.
told Pingy this. Like, I'm not upset that they lost to Philly. I'm upset that we didn't get a chance to see which team was really better. Like, the way that all went down just sucked for any fan of the football. Like, that should have been an amazing game between two great teams. And I don't know who would have come out on top, but the way it went down sucked.
For all of us, that was horrible. For all of us.
Yeah.
Like, to see that happen, and you're like, oh, my God, Josh Johnson is having a play in a championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's nobody deserves that. Nobody.
Well, it would have been better if he could have at least kept playing rather than him getting
fourth string quarterback
go back in and not being able to throw the ball at all. That didn't help.
Right.
Yeah.
Not much
Maybe
different than what
defense.
Miami had to deal with too.
Hey, they changed the game because now you can have a emergency quarterback on your game day roster so that shit doesn't happen again.
It's ridiculous that anyone on the 53-man roster is not active on game day. Like, just make the full 53 active again.
That's what I think, too. Like,
just
what the fuck does it matter?
Dumb. Yeah.
I agree. That's a dumb rule.
Whatever,
Change
guys,
that
whatever positions you want to have active, let them be active. Like,
because they get
leave it up to the teams. Yeah, let the teams decide which positions they want to have extra backups. Like,
so what do you feel about your 49ers this year as far as, are we Super Bowl bust? Are we let's go deep in the playoffs and we're happy? Where are you kind of standing right there with your team this year?
I'm never a Super Bowl or bust guy because I think that's a miserable way to be a fan because most teams don't get there. You can have a really fun, really great season without that. I know because the last couple of years of the Niners, I've had so much fun watching those teams, the journeys they've gone on through the season. Like, you can enjoy a season for what it is and the highs and the lows and the wins and the exciting moments without it ending with a Super Bowl victory. Like, that should not be anyone's only measure for success in any sport. Like, title or bust mentality is terrible if you're a sports fan because most teams aren't going to get there in any given year. One team gets there, and if 29 other teams are miserable because they didn't get there, that's a shitty way to run anything. So I think that
Jerry Jones is a big fan of yours right now, by the way. Big fan of Greg.
Right.
well, no, he should feel really bad because they've been bad and sad and hilarious. Just Zeke's final play as a Cowboy being mowed over by the 49ers, it just brings me so much joy. But
yes.
So to me, it's all about, as you go through a season, unknown things happen. There's all the adjustments and things. Like, I'm hoping for a deep playoff run. I'm hoping for a Super Bowl appearance. Would love a Super Bowl win, but it all comes down to how it plays out, right? Like, I mean, there's a million things that can happen that change what's a realistic outcome as you go through the year. I hope they are a respectable team that wins more games than they lose, have a couple of good playoff games, and that's a pretty good year for me. I love the Niners. I'm a longtime diehard Niners fan, but I also don't live and die with sports anymore. So I can accept things as they are, and it doesn't have to be a Super Bowl for it to be a successful and fun season.
I root for so many other teams now because of fantasy football that I feel like I'm not really disappointed. I might still get angry occasionally watching my team play.
Sure. I absolutely get angry. Don't mistake my I don't live and die with the team for being I don't get mad at stupid shit. Like, I still yell at the coaches and yell at the TV and all that, but at the end of the day, the game ends and I go, okay, and I move on.
You got to give me an hour still. You got to give me an hour. Like, give me an hour. I will or at least give me till the Broncos play the late window. Give me till the Sunday night game. By the Sunday night game, I'm cool, but I need a little bit of time. So I am super excited. I'm gonna just jump in. I'm super excited for, I've got two teams I'm excited for. The Lions are one of those teams.
The Lions should be good this year.
I watched a lot of Lions games early, and their defense was really bad early. Their offense trailed off in the second half, but then their defense played really good down the stretch. So, I feel like that team is, starting to put it together, and they could be really fun to watch this season. I am excited about the Lions. My second team I'm super excited for, I love Joey B. I do. He hasn't gotten the trophies like Montana, but to me, he's like the second coming of Montana. I love it. I really like watching him play.
I still got to figure out who my Jaguars are going to be this year. I haven't quite come to a decision yet. Greg, I called the Jags being in the playoffs last year, dark horse to win the division, and Pinky literally told me I'm effing stupid. It was a glorious day all around.
True. That is true.
So I got that one under my belt. I'm still looking to see who I think can have that turnaround this year. I hate saying it, but I think Chicago might have some potential to do that. By no means am I saying that just yet. I still got some research to do. But I think the thing I am most excited about this year, just as a football fan in general, is to watch some guys, I believe, get rid of the running quarterback label and finally be classified as a quarterback or a dual threat quarterback, however you want to look at it. Lamar Jackson's at the top of that list. Justin Fields is right there as well. I believe those guys are going to be able to knock those labels off of them this year and show people that they can play the position. So it'll be fun to see how that goes. Yes, Cody. Pinky does tell me that a lot on those takes. And then we have recently decided that I'm probably about a 70% accuracy. So, hey, we'll start keeping track. But you even agreed that I'm on the right side of things for the most part.
I got a suggestion. I don't know how much even I believe in this, just because it feels wrong. But take a deeper look at the Jets.
I love the Jets this year, actually. I know a lot of people are thinking they could be the Broncos of this year, but I think, and I'm a big A-Rod guy, so I think the only reason they had some issues last year and he wasn't competing for an MVP is a broken thumb on his throwing finger or his throwing hand that completely went underplayed the entire season. So I think A-Rod is going to have a bounce back year. And I truly believe, I don't think he's fallen off at all.
Oh,
so
dude, I would not the Patriots are the worst team in that division. How long has it been since we could say that?
Dude, I still think Bailey Zappi's the better quarterback on that roster. I still believe Bailey Zappi's better than Mac Jones.
I think that's a good argument, Caleb. I wouldn't even call you.
I think you're right. That one, buddy. Yeah. Hey, so here's the thing with my Jets take. I don't like Aaron Rodgers, but I also forgot that they traded for Aaron Rodgers. So my Jets take is not as hot take as I thought it was.
No, it is definitely not a hot take.
Back. I think Garrett Wilson has a huge year with Aaron Rodgers. I think Garrett Wilson has a big year.
Oh, bro. So, I just the Jets with the Jets defense, they almost made the playoffs last year with Mike White, Zach Wilson, and I think the ghost of Joe Flacco even played a game or two.
Yeah.
They almost made the playoffs. With Aaron Rodgers, that is a playoff roster, bro. It's going
to be dangerous.
So I think it's not really a hot take, Greg. That's
not going to
be I wouldn't have thrown it out there as a hot take if I had remembered they traded for Aaron Rodgers.
Right. I actually, another team that I'll throw out there right now, just kind of put people's minds that I think I'm never I've been down on the last couple of years, but I think they're going to surprise some people, and part of it's the division they play in. But I think the Saints could have a really good year, bounce back year. I think you could see a pretty decent Derek Carr, Chris Olave, a couple of their rookies. I think they could be a
Mike
surprise.
Thomas might play. Who knows?
No, screw Mike Thomas. They don't need him. They'll probably bring them down if he plays, so he should just retire. We all know how I feel about Mike Thomas, Pinky. Overrated. Product of Drew Brees, plain and simple. But I think the Saints could be pretty solid too. Saints and Bears are kind of at the top of my list as I kind of go through things. But a little more research, season gets closer. There might be a dark horse that pops up, but we'll see. But
You lost me at
I'm
pretty
excited.
decent Derek Carr.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We've always thought Derek Carr's been a little underrated based on he hasn't always had the best talent around him in LA or Vegas.
He also hasn't had the
Oakland
best
or-
coaching around him compared to some of the other NFL QBs that have been out there. His coaches have not done him any favors.
I'm not a Derek Carr guy.
Pinky's not either. But he has.
Whoa,
he
hold
has
on.
said, I'm not saying
on.
you're against him. You just haven't necessarily been a fan of, but you've
So-
given him his respect.
Derek Carr's in that group of guys. Jared Goff, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins. If they're protected, they're awesome. If they have any bit of pressure on them, they fold like a bitch or a chair. One of the two.
The thing about Derek Carr is he is wildly overrated because of fantasy football stats.
I
puts up
lean on the
numbers.
side of agreeing with you to an extent, but he did have, Pinky, help me, 2016, 2017, somewhere in there.
2016, he was MVP
before he
candidate.
busted his knee, right?
He broke his leg, yeah.
That's 7 years ago.
I know. I'm not trying to say he's an MVP candidate going forward, but once I see that potential and I see somebody play at that level, I have to start wondering, why are they not playing at that level more regularly? Is it talent around them? Is it the coaching? Is it the player just had one good year? Is it a combination of everything? You know, Carson Wentz, a lot of people looked at him and go, oh, well, he's obviously still good. The Eagles just didn't know what they were doing. It probably turns out that the Eagles were right on track and needed to move on from him, and it worked out really well for them. But he was about to be an MVP before he tore his ACL. So those are the things that always get me going. I've been a big Darnold guy for a long time. Pinky keeps telling me I'm stupid for still believing, but I've seen enough flashes of potential from him and seen nothing but trash around him from coaching and personnel that I think he's never gotten a true opportunity to prove what he can do. I think this is a make or break year for Darnold. In a Shanahan offense with all that talent, I do believe he's the most talented quarterback on that roster. I do believe he wins the job in camp, and I think he balls out. But if he doesn't, he's going to be lucky to be looking at backup jobs going forward, because what he's got on tape isn't good. So there's always this give and take, and I think, and I've said this a bunch, Greg, on our show, the NFL to me is the king of square peg round hole. And they will always think they're right, regardless of whether or not somebody tells them they're wrong. And if a player goes somewhere else and succeeds, it doesn't have anything to do with that previous organization doing things wrong. It just, they finally got the player to grow and learn kind of thing. So we'll see what happens with some of these guys. But Lamar Jackson's about to prove to Pinky that he can throw the ball, and I think Justin Fields is about to do the same.
I have Lamar in a couple fantasy leagues, bro. I hope so. I've been waiting. This is his chance, though.
I mean, to your
He's gotta-
point,
he's
Caleb,
gotta
look at
show it.
Geno Smith in Seattle. Guy who was put in
I'm
bad
still-
situations for a long time and got the right situation, the right type of roster around him, and looked pretty solid.
I'm still waiting for Geno to turn back into a pumpkin like he did in the playoff game. He did not look good in that playoff game.
I don't like saying anything good about anyone who's a Seattle player, so but I want to give him a little bit of credit because I like the guy coming out of college. I thought he got a kind of a raw deal throughout the early part of his
Definitely.
career. I still
The
don't
video
think
game
he's
numbers he was
the
putting
Jets.
up at West Virginia before he came out
Yeah.
where it was something fun to watch.
Well, anybody
Yeah.
getting drafted to the Jets, I mean, it doesn't normally work out for you.
I mean, let's be honest. The Jets drafted Darnold, did nothing to help him, decided he was the problem. Drafted Zach Wilson, did nothing around him, decided he was the problem. One of those is right, for sure. I don't think Zach Wilson should have ever been drafted where he was, especially coming out of BYU and the level of competition and things of that nature he showed that he played against wasn't anything like Darnold had. But, they got Aaron Rodgers now. They can move on just fine and not have to worry about it for the next 2 years, hopefully.
2 years seems optimistic.
It does. I'm gonna try to be optimistic.
I
Since
think Aaron Rodgers plays 2 years because he did redo his contract for the Jets too.
Oh, I think
I
he'll
think he's
play
playing
2
2
years.
years.
I'm just saying, I'm disagreeing with that they won't have anything to worry about for 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, next offseason they'll be worried whether or not he's coming back. His play should be fine. I'm not worried about his play dropping off.
Oh,
But,
no, I'm saying his play is going to be an issue.
So
Oh, no way. No way. Rodgers will play. I believe he'll be just fine. Just fine. I
Yeah,
haven't seen anything fall off with his play yet.
I'm excited for
Really?
every AFC East game.
Again, last year he was playing with a broken thumb on his throwing hand.
And his best receiver was Alan Lazard. Like, that was his best receiver last year.
Didn't the Jets bring in Lazard?
As
did.
a number 2, maybe 3.
Behind Randall Cobb.
They did bring in Randall Cobb as well, actually.
Come on.
Garrett
I'm completely
Wilson's the
changing my
real
Jets
deal.
take here.
Garrett Wilson's going to show flashes of a Justin Jefferson this year, I think, with Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be special.
I don't know about that, but he's going to be pretty good. He's going to
1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns, somewhere in that ballpark.
I don't think that.
I just want to go on records. I'm completely changing my Jets take.
All right,
I don't like Aaron Rodgers.
Cody, that was
last
the other
thing-
thing I wanted to discuss here real quick that I thought was pretty interesting. Came out this week that the Raiders are actually not as dumb as everybody thought they were. And they have a clause in Jimmy G's contract that if he cannot pass a physical, they can basically walk away from him with no damage whatsoever. No money, no issues. They can just move on free and clear. Then, Pinky, following that news, literally like minutes later, I'm scrolling through some stuff, and it hits me that Carson Wentz is available. And it would not surprise me in the least if Carson Wentz ends up being the Raiders' starting quarterback this season.
There's more of a chance that Tom Brady becomes a quarterback for the Raiders than Carson Wentz.
So here's the kicker about that, and this is why I say Carson Wentz has a better chance. In order, and I just learned this today, which I think is it blew my mind. In order for Tom Brady to be able to be the quarterback of the Raiders this year as a minority owner, every owner in the NFL has to approve of him playing for the Raiders. And we all know there's no way in hell that's happening. There is no way in hell every owner in the NFL is going to say, yeah, Brady, you can go ahead and play for him. That way you guys can have Brady instead of Carson Wentz.
Caleb, we all know that Tom Brady can sell his stake in the team for X amount and buy it back for X amount the following season. Like, it's easy to do.
It is. And you know how I feel about numbers.
And they could have him sell his stake for more than what it's worth to offset a lower contract.
Right.
Absolutely. All of those things are true. All of those things are true. But as it stands right now, every owner in the NFL has to approve him playing. And there's no way in hell that happens. Zero chance that happens.
If you think Tom Brady's not going to be like, yeah, cut Jimmy so I can play. Like, he's all about that.
Damn right he is. You know he is. Not to mention, it would just be another middle finger to the owner of the Raiders that he just bought in with for allowing John Gruden to say no to him and not take him 3 years ago when it sounded like the deal was basically done. So, yeah, there's a lot of things going for Tom Brady to be the starter this year. But I'm just saying, as of right now, owners are not voting yes on that. So Carson Wentz has a better chance. Now, can Brady sell? Absolutely. Will he? Probably. Is he probably going to be the day one starter for the Raiders? Yeah, you both are probably right. But I'm talking about right now, in this moment, Carson Wentz has a better opportunity or a higher percentage.
I like that you opened with the Raiders aren't that dumb. Here's a way they could have Carson Wentz.
Did you like that build up? That was good, wasn't it?
That was a great setup.
Oh,
I actually like Brady post New England. I would hate him playing for the Raiders. I don't like that idea, but it makes sense.
God, there's so many things that would just make that an epic fail. It feels like that I just want it to happen for so many different reasons.
Oh man, I think he would help them a lot. I don't think they're very close to being a playoff contender at their current status, but
I mean, Jeremy, that would be just phenomenal to watch that unfold.
I have no idea why they didn't just keep Stidham and roll with Stidham this year. And let the chips fall where they may.
Payton has already told everybody that Stidham is about to be a starter. That's why. That's why Stidham signed with Denver. Because Peyton basically guaranteed him starting halfway through the year, Pinky. I don't know how many times we have to go over this. Russ is losing that job.
It's just not happening, bro. It's just not happening.
That Walmart money don't care about paying Russ' contract off, and neither does Sean Payton.
It's a good insurance policy, though. I'll take that. It's a good insurance policy.
Oh, goodness. Greg, since you decided to stay with us, thank you for being willing to enjoy the nonsense as we move forward. Final thoughts, sir. Anything sports related, basketball, finals, football, plug in your guys again, anything. What are you thinking?
No, I don't have anything more. Go Nuggets. And
yes.
And as a non-Broncos fan, I hope Russell Wilson stays the Broncos quarterback for as long as possible.
And plays well, Dick.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, man. Well, Pinky, that tells you how the rest of the league feels about Russ and the Broncos. Just, no.
I think I like Russ as a guy. I like Russ, so I hope
Nothing against him as a person. Nothing against him as a person. That's all. That's just, sometimes people need to learn to be able to separate the two and understand it's not personal. Pinky, final thoughts, sir.
It's all about the Nuggets, baby. Am I going to get my next tattoo? And hopefully my team's not down 16 at halftime and then wins it.
Oh, come on. We had fun that game.
Well, so when Kansas was in the national championship game with my tattoo on the line, they were down 16 at halftime. And they came back to win.
Pinky, I feel like I'm letting you down, or I'm not giving you the proper tools to understand basketball still when you say things like that, because one of the first things I made sure you understood about basketball was everybody goes on runs. So unless you're down 20 with 3 minutes left, you're still good. Like, you're still fine. So don't worry about the runs, buddy. You're good. Nugs down 15 to the Lakers in game 4. We're good. Don't worry about it, my guy.
I know, Greg. That's what Greg told me. Greg's like, don't worry, Pinky. It's fine. The Lakers suck. It's fine. And they proved him right.
Love it. Love it. Go Nugs. Gentleman's sweep would be phenomenal. Any victory would be something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. Always hope. Wasn't sure if I'd ever actually get to witness it. And death to the running quarterback, birth to the dual threat quarterback this season.
They still got to win a Super Bowl, buddy. They still got to win a Super Bowl.
You and your field goal posts and where you place them and then move them around is something else.
I'm just saying, no running quarterback has won a Super Bowl. Just
Steve Young.
No, he won't accept that, Greg. We've tried. That's
he didn't
not
run at all in
acceptable.
that game. He threw 6 touchdowns. He did not run in that game.
Apparently, he went from a running quarterback to a throwing quarterback and was no longer dual threat in Pinky's eyes. So
Steve Young
I'm
was
still
one of the most
working on where
accurate
these
quarterbacks of all
definitions lie
time.
in his head.
Once he started playing quarterback regularly for the 49ers, he was one of the most accurate quarterbacks of all time. I'm not going to.
So because he was accurate, all of a sudden he's not a dual threat quarterback, Greg. There's some very
you're wrong.
points.
You're very, very wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong.
You are.
He didn't run at all. He didn't run in that Super Bowl at all. I'm not wrong.
You're talking about a game he didn't run, so he's not a running quarterback?
He's not a running quarterback at all. I would not put – I put Steve Young, absolutely. He had one of the greatest runs ever against the Minnesota Vikings. I know. I've watched that clip multiple times.
Tried to discuss how John Elway was really actually a dual threat quarterback throughout his career. Pinky didn't like that. In the 80s? Pinky didn't like that at all either.
That dude did not run in the 90s when he won Super Bowls. No running quarterback has won the Super Bowl.
There's a difference between a quarterback that can run but doesn't have to because he finally has a really good team around him, or a quarterback that has to run because his team's trash, and you calling them two different things. We've been over this, and it's not changing yet. So, we just need one of them to win the Super Bowl.
Hey, I'm all here for it, buddy. I'm here for it. Jalen Hurts was pretty close to a running quarterback in some cases his first 2 years. He threw a lot more last season. And he would have been the first guy to do it. And he was that close. He was a bad interference call from winning. But, it hasn't happened yet. It will happen. It's going to happen.
So, Greg, if you want to hear some really fun conversations out of us, root for Lamar Jackson to throw for like 5,000 yards and Justin Fields to throw for like 4,000. And you will just hear just an amazing amount of material come out of this show.
There is no fucking way Lamar throws for 5,000. He hasn't thrown for more than 3,500. He's not throwing for 5,000.
And that has nothing to do with the offensive coordinator or the weapons around him or any of that. It's just the fact that he can't do it, right?
Zay Flowers, big whoop.
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to argue with you there. I don't think they got a lot of talent for him. But regardless, we'll end with this. Jeremy, Pinky said if the Nugs win the championship, he will be getting a Nugs tattoo, and we are well on our way to be able to.
Greg helped me refine it. I'm gonna get the old city logo, the minor logo, and the new pickaxe somewhere with Jamal Murray.
I would have said the city skyline, but it's going on your body, so I'm trying not to have my input. I'm trying to just allow you to honor your bet. Because I know how personal tattoos can get, and I don't necessarily like people giving me their 2 cents on stuff I've already decided. So I get it, but if you're going skyline, dude, you're right on track there. No, that's Jeremy. Sorry, buddy, but that's one of the worst logos that the Nuggets probably the worst logo NBA's ever seen. In all honesty, the only good thing about those jerseys was the fact that Mutombo and those boys were able to upset Seattle. Other than that, those jerseys were real bad. Real bad. On that note, Greg, again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Always appreciate it, and we're serious. You're always welcome. If you get any opportunity, you got some free time, you want to jump on and chop it up, you don't have to give us notice. Just tell us you're ready, and we'll send you an invite, my guy.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. And as we always end it, everybody knows, do not take those moments with your inner circle, your loved ones, family, friends for granted. Cherish those moments. Love every second of them, and, enjoy as much as possible. Cheers to both of you guys. Appreciate you. We're out. Peace.